Elena Reyes woke up screaming her daughter's name before she even opened her eyes. The dream had been so real. Lily standing in a white room, calling for her mother, her small hands pressed against a glass wall that would not break no matter how hard she pounded on it. Elena sat up in bed, her heart racing, sweat cooling on her skin. It was 3 in the morning. Down the hall, she could hear nothing. No soft breathing, no shifting of blankets, only silence. She was on her feet before she even decided to move. The hallway felt longer than it had ever felt before, the carpet cold under her bare feet. She pushed open Lily's bedroom door and flipped on the light. The bed was empty. For a moment, Elena told herself that Lily had simply gone to the bathroom or wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. 7-year-old children did that sometimes. But something in her chest told her this was different. She checked the bathroom. Empty. She checked the kitchen. Empty. She checked the living room, the closets, even the space under Lily's bed where the little girl liked to hide during games of hide and seek. Nothing. The window in Lily's room was still locked from the inside. The front door was still bolted. There was no broken glass, no sign of forced entry. Nothing that made sense in the ordinary world. Elena's hands began to shake as she pulled out her phone and dialed the number for the local police station, her voice cracking as she tried to explain that her daughter had vanished from a locked house without a trace. What Elena did not know yet, what she would not learn for many weeks, was that her daughter had not been taken by a stranger in the night. She had been taken by something far stranger, something that had already visited over 60 homes in 12 different countries that same week, moving with a precision and silence that no human criminal could ever achieve. 3 years earlier, the world had changed forever, when a fleet of enormous silver ships descended slowly out of a clear blue sky and hovered above the largest cities on Earth. There was no attack, no demand, only a calm, synthetic voice that spoke every language on the planet at once, offering peace and partnership. The visitors called themselves the Kryvox, a species from a dying star system many light years away. Their world was failing, poisoned by centuries of their own progress, and they had come to Earth seeking a new home and new allies. At first, humanity was terrified. Military forces across the globe were placed on high alert. World leaders debated in secret rooms about whether to fight or negotiate, but the Kryvox made no aggressive move. Instead, they offered gifts. Clean energy technology that could power entire cities without pollution. Medical advancements that cured diseases doctors had fought against for generations. Communication systems that connected every corner of the world instantly. Slowly, cautiously, the fear turned into fascination, and the fascination turned into trust. Within 2 years, Kryvox representatives sat in the United Nations. Kryvox scientists worked alongside human researchers in shared laboratories. Kryvox teachers even began offering what they called an enrichment program for children, a special educational exchange meant to help the brightest young minds on Earth learn alongside gifted young Kryvox in immersive learning centers built on Kryvox soil, just outside the atmosphere, aboard massive orbital stations. Parents lined up in the thousands to enroll their children. It was seen as an honor, a golden ticket to a future filled with opportunity. Lily Reyes had been selected only 2 weeks before she disappeared. Elena had been so proud. She had helped her daughter pack a small bag of favorite books and a stuffed rabbit named Buttons, and she had waved goodbye at the departure center, watching her daughter's shuttle rise into the clouds with a mixture of pride and nervous excitement. She had been told the program would last 1 month. Lily would return changed, the recruiters promised, smarter, more confident, ready to help shape the future of human and Kryvox cooperation. 3 days before Lily's scheduled return, Elena had received nothing. No message, no call, no update through the special parent portal the program had set up. When she tried to log in, the portal displayed only a small spinning icon and the words, "Please wait. Your child's data is being processed." Then came the night Lily vanished from her bed at home, a bed she should not have even been in yet, since her official return date was still 2 days away. Elena stared at the police officer sitting across from her kitchen table, a tired-looking man named Gareth Holloway who kept glancing nervously at his notepad instead of at her face. "I don't understand," Elena said, her voice hoarse from crying. She wasn't even supposed to be home yet. She was still up there. With them. How can she disappear from a place she was never even in? Gareth cleared his throat. Mrs. Reyes, I know this is difficult, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm while I do. We received 17 other calls tonight, all reporting the same thing. Children who were enrolled in the same enrichment program, vanishing from locked homes in the middle of the night. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. 17? As of an hour ago, yes. The number keeps growing. Elena stood up so fast that her chair toppled backward and clattered against the tile floor. Then they're back. If they're vanishing from their beds, that means somebody brought them back and then took them again. Somebody is inside our homes. Gareth did not answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, careful, the voice of a man choosing each word like he was walking across thin ice. We don't know what's happening yet, but I promise you, we are going to find out. Elena barely slept that night, and the nights that followed blurred together into a single long stretch of fear and waiting. She called the enrichment program's hotline over and over, but the calls always ended the same way, with a calm, automated voice thanking her for her patience and promising that a representative would reach out soon. No representative ever called. 9 days after Lily disappeared, Elena received a knock at her door. Standing on her porch was not a Kryvox representative, but a woman Elena had never seen before, dressed in a plain gray coat, her eyes darting nervously toward the street, as though she were afraid of being followed. Are you Lily's mother? The woman asked. Elena's heart jumped into her throat. Who are you? Do you know where my daughter is? My name is Grace Milton, the woman said quietly. I used to work as a translator for the enrichment program. I was let go 2 weeks ago after I asked too many questions. I think you need to hear what I know, and I think you need to hear it now, before anyone realizes I came here. Elena stepped aside without hesitation, letting the stranger into her home, into her kitchen, into the one place where she still felt some small illusion of safety. Grace sat at the table, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she never drank. I worked inside the Orbital Learning Center for almost a year, she began. At first, everything really did seem wonderful. The children were happy, the classrooms were bright, the Kryvox instructors were patient and kind. But about 4 months ago, I started noticing things that didn't add up. Certain children would be pulled out of regular classes for what the staff called specialized assessments. They would come back different, quieter. Sometimes they wouldn't remember entire days. Elena's hands tightened around the edge of the table. What kind of assessments? I don't know exactly, Grace admitted. I was never given clearance for that section of the station. But I overheard 2 Kryvox scientists talking once, in their own language, not realizing I could understand parts of it because of my translation training. They were talking about something called the accelerant process. They said human children's brains developed faster than expected under certain conditions, and that this rapid development produced something valuable, something they needed for their homeworld. Needed for what? Elena whispered. I don't know, Grace said. But whatever it isn't good for the children. 2 of the kids in my assigned group started having seizures after their specialized assessments. One little boy stopped speaking entirely. When I asked what was being done to help them, I was told it was a private medical matter and that I should focus on my own duties. A week later, I was removed from the program completely. Elena felt sick. She thought of her daughter's small hands, her bright laugh, her habit of counting stairs out loud every time she climbed them. What are we supposed to do? The government trusts these people. They've given us so much. Grace reached across the table and gently took Elena's hand. That's exactly why nobody wants to believe this is happening. Too many people, too many countries, have built their entire futures on trusting the Kryvox. Nobody wants to be the one who says the partnership might be built on something terrible. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of Elena's small house. Somewhere above the clouds, in an orbital station bright with false comfort, her daughter and dozens of other missing children were waiting in rooms that no parent on Earth had ever been allowed to see. Elena looked up at Grace, and for the first time since Lily vanished, something inside her hardened into resolve instead of fear. Then we find someone who knows the truth, Elena said. Someone from the inside, someone who can tell us exactly what is happening to our children and how we get them home. Grace hesitated, then nodded slowly. There might be someone. A Kryvox scientist named Thrain. He was part of the research team, but from what I heard, he started refusing to continue certain procedures. Word is, he's been in hiding from his own people for weeks. Elena stood, her chair scraping against the floor, her exhaustion replaced by a fierce, burning determination. Then we find him, whatever it takes. Neither of them could have known, in that quiet kitchen with the tea going cold, that the search for Therain would lead them into a hidden world of secrets, danger, and a truth so devastating that it would eventually force all of humanity to choose between fear and fury, and that the choice they made would decide the fate of an entire species. Far above them, in a chamber lit with soft artificial light, Lily Reyes sat with her knees pulled to her chest, watching a Kryvox scientist write notes on a translucent screen. Beside her, a dozen other children sat in similar silence, their eyes distant, their small bodies connected to devices that hummed quietly, monitoring something inside them that they could not name and did not understand. Lily did not cry. She had learned, somehow, without anyone teaching her, that crying did not help here. Instead, she waited, the way she always waited at home for her mother to come find her, certain in some small, unbroken part of her heart that somebody, somewhere, was already looking. She was right. Therain had not slept in what felt like days, though sleep meant something different for his kind than it did for humans. He existed now in a state of constant, quiet alertness, moving between abandoned buildings on the edge of a human city, wrapped in a long coat and a wide hood that hid the parts of his face that would mark him instantly as something other than human. His skin, beneath the fabric, held a faint gray undertone, and his eyes, when the light caught them wrong, glowed the color of dim amber. He had learned to keep his head down, his steps quiet, his presence small. 3 weeks earlier, he had been one of the lead researchers on the accelerant process, a project he had once believed would save his people. Now he understood it for what it truly was, and the understanding sat inside him like a stone he could not put down. His homeworld, Kalen Voss, was dying. Its sun had entered a slow collapse decades earlier, and the radiation shifts had begun destroying the genetic stability of every living creature on the planet, including the Kryvox themselves. Entire generations were being born with shortened lifespans, weakened minds, bodies that failed before they ever reached maturity. The Council of Elders had searched the stars for a solution, and they had found it, they believed, in the unique biology of Earth's children. Human minds, especially young ones, produced a rare neurological compound during rapid growth phases, a compound that stabilized cellular structure in ways nothing else in the known galaxy could replicate. The Council called it the accelerant. Therain and his team had been tasked with extracting it, refining it, and using it to reverse the genetic collapse threatening their entire species. At first, Therain told himself it was a fair exchange. The children would be monitored, cared for, given every comfort. Nothing would be taken that could not be replenished. But the truth revealed itself slowly, the way poison seeps into water long before anyone notices the taste has changed. The compound could not simply be harvested through simple observation or non-invasive procedures, as the Council had promised the human governments who allowed the program to continue. It required deep, repeated extraction, procedures that placed enormous strain on a child's still developing nervous system. Some children recovered fully, others did not. 2 had already lost the ability to speak. One little boy, only 6 years old, had slipped into a state doctors on the station could not reverse, his mind trapped somewhere between sleep and waking, unresponsive to every treatment his caretakers attempted. When Therain raised these concerns to the Council, he was told that the loss was acceptable, that the survival of an entire species could not be measured against the well-being of individuals belonging to another. He was told to continue his work. When he refused, when he tried to leak information to a human colleague, the Council moved quickly to silence him. He had escaped only hours before they came for him, using knowledge of Earth's transportation systems that he had gathered during years of peaceful cooperation. Now he hid in the shadows of the very species he had once studied from a laboratory window, hoping desperately that someone, somewhere, would listen to what he had to say before it was too late for the children still trapped above the clouds. Elena found him on a rain-soaked evening, 11 days after Lily disappeared, in an abandoned train station on the outskirts of the city. Grace had spent days following whispers and rumors, through old contacts from her time with the enrichment program, piecing together fragments of information until they finally led to a name, a location, and a warning. "He's dangerous," one contact had said, "not because he'll hurt you, but because being near him puts you in danger. If the Kryvox Council finds out you've made contact, you become a target too." Elena had not hesitated. "I don't care about danger. I care about my daughter." The train station was dark and silent, its old brick walls covered in vines that had crept in through broken windows over the years since it had been abandoned. Elena walked through the entrance with Grace close behind her, their footsteps echoing against the concrete. For a long moment, there was nothing but darkness and the distant sound of rain against the roof. Then a voice spoke from the shadows, low and careful, carrying a strange, layered quality that human voices did not have.
"You should not have come here."
Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm, to stand her ground. "I'm looking for Thrain. I was told you might know what's happening to the children taken by the enrichment program. My daughter is one of them." A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from behind a rusted pillar, tall and thin, wrapped in a heavy coat, hood pulled low over a face that was almost, but not quite, human. "I am Thrain," the figure said, "and I know exactly what is happening to your daughter, because I am the one who built the process that is happening to her." Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides, grief and fury rising together inside her chest. "Then you're going to tell me everything, and then you're going to help me get her back." Thrain lowered his hood, revealing his gray-tinted skin and amber eyes fully for the first time. There was no threat in his expression, only a deep, weary sorrow that Elena recognized instantly, the same sorrow she had seen reflected in her own bathroom mirror every morning since Lily vanished. "I will tell you everything," Thrain said quietly. "But you must understand, once you know the truth, there is no going back to the world you believed you were living in. The peace between our species was never as simple as we told you it was." Elena did not flinch. "I stopped believing in simple a long time ago. Tell me." Over the next 2 hours, sitting on cold concrete steps inside the abandoned station, Thrain explained everything. He spoke of Kalen Voss and its dying son, of the accelerant process, of the children whose bright, rapidly developing minds were being used to harvest a substance that could save an entire alien civilization. He spoke of the ones who had not survived the process intact, of the boy trapped in unbroken sleep, of the quiet ones who no longer spoke. Elena listened without interrupting, tears streaming silently down her face, her hands pressed hard against her knees to keep them from shaking. When Thrain finished, the silence in the station felt heavier than the darkness itself. "How many children?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How many are up there right now?" 63, Thrain said. "Taken from 12 different countries, all enrolled through the enrichment program, all currently housed in the primary research wing of the orbital station. Your daughter is among them. She has not yet undergone a deep extraction procedure. There is still time." "Then we go get her," Elena said immediately, rising to her feet. "We go get all of them." "It is not that simple," Thrain said. "The orbital station is heavily protected, both by Kryvox security systems and by an agreement your own government signed. An agreement that grants the Kryvox full authority over activities occurring within the enrichment program. Even if human forces wanted to intervene, doing so would violate treaties that could dissolve the entire partnership overnight, something many world leaders are unwilling to risk, especially without solid proof." "Then we get proof," Grace said firmly, speaking for the first time since they had entered the station. "Thrain, you worked on this project. You must have records, data, something that shows what's really happening up there." Thrain hesitated, his amber eyes flicking between the two women. "I have some records, saved before I fled, but what I have is not enough on its own. To truly expose the program, I would need updated data, something recent, something undeniable, something that shows the Council is actively continuing procedures on the children even now, despite what they claim publicly." "Then how do we get that?" Elena asked. Thrain was quiet for a long moment before he answered. "There is a way. Difficult, dangerous, and if we are caught, there will be no mercy from the Council. But if we succeed, We will have everything needed to force the world to see the truth. Tell me, Elena said, stepping closer, refusing to let fear slow her down even for a second. Whatever it takes, I'm doing it. Thrain studied her for a long moment, as though weighing something deep inside himself, some final piece of resistance finally breaking apart. There is a secondary transport dock, used for smaller supply shuttles traveling between Earth and the orbital station, he said finally. It is less guarded than the main entrance, but it still requires clearance codes that only active personnel possess. I still have partial access, though the Council may have already flagged my credentials. If we move quickly, before they finish revoking everything tied to my identity, we may be able to slip aboard a supply shuttle and reach the station directly. And once we're there, Grace asked, how do we get evidence, and how do we get the children out? Getting evidence will be dangerous but possible, Thrain said. Getting the children out will be far harder. The station is designed to prevent unauthorized departures. Even if we free them from their holding chambers, escaping with 63 children without triggering a full security response will require more than luck. Elena's jaw tightened, but her voice did not waver. Then we make sure it isn't just luck we're relying on. Over the following days, the three of them worked in secret, meeting in hidden locations, moving carefully to avoid detection from both human authorities, who might question their activities, and Kryvox agents, who were almost certainly searching for Thrain. Grace used her old contacts within the enrichment program to gather partial staffing schedules and station layouts. Thrain used his remaining access to pull whatever fragments of data he could without triggering security alerts. Elena, meanwhile, became the glue holding it all together, her grief transformed into a fierce, unshakable focus that neither exhaustion nor fear could break. On the fifth night, as they finalized their plan inside a rented storage unit filled with borrowed equipment and printed station schematics, Elena looked up at Thrain, studying his face carefully. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "You could disappear, change your appearance, hide somewhere far from both your people and mine, live out the rest of your life in peace. Why risk everything to help us instead?" Thrain was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes distant, focused on some memory Elena could not see. "Because I have held children in my arms while machines drained something vital from their small bodies, and I told myself it was necessary," he said finally, his voice heavy with something that sounded almost like shame. "I believed the survival of my species justified it. But survival built on the suffering of innocence is not survival worth having. I cannot undo what I have already done, but I can make certain it stops, even if it costs me everything." Elena reached out and placed a hand on his arm, a small, human gesture that seemed to surprise him. "Then let's make sure it stops," she said. "Together." 3 nights later, wearing stolen staff uniforms and carrying forged credentials, Thrain had managed to assemble using his remaining knowledge of Kryvox security systems. Elena, Grace, and Thrain stood at the edge of the secondary transport dock, watching a supply shuttle prepare for departure, beneath a sky littered with stars. "Whatever happens up there," Elena said quietly, staring up at the distant orbital station glinting faintly against the darkness, "we do not leave without those children." Thrain nodded once, his expression grim but resolute. "Then let us begin." Together, the three of them stepped toward the shuttle, unaware that the moment they boarded, they would set into motion a chain of events that would eventually reach every corner of the Earth, exposing a secret so devastating that it would shatter the fragile peace between two worlds forever. The supply shuttle rose through the atmosphere in near silence, its engines humming with a low, steady vibration that Elena felt in her teeth more than heard with her ears. She sat pressed between crates of medical supplies, her borrowed uniform stiff and unfamiliar against her skin, her heart pounding so hard she was certain the sound alone might give them away. Across from her, Grace stared straight ahead, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Thrain occupied the small cockpit space beside the shuttle's automated pilot system, his fingers moving carefully across a control panel, covered in symbols Elena could not read. "We are approaching the docking ring," Thrain said quietly, without turning around. "Once we land, we will have perhaps 20 minutes before the shift change brings fresh security patrols through this section. That is our window." 20 minutes to find proof," Grace said. "And the children." 20 minutes to find proof," Thrain corrected gently, Freeing the children will require a separate operation, one we are not yet prepared for. Tonight, we gather what we need to force the truth into the open. That is the only way any rescue will succeed without triggering something far worse than we can currently survive. Elena wanted to argue, every instinct in her body screaming to run straight for wherever Lily was being held and pull her free with her bare hands if necessary. But she forced herself to breathe, to trust the plan they had spent days building. A single reckless mistake could ruin everything, not just for Lily, but for all 63 children trapped aboard the station. The shuttle docked with a soft mechanical clunk, and the doors hissed open into a dim, narrow corridor, lit by pale blue lighting embedded in smooth metallic walls. The air smelled faintly of something clean and sterile, almost like a hospital, though the architecture around them curved in strange, organic patterns that no human building would ever replicate. "Stay close," Thrain whispered, stepping out first, his stolen credentials held ready in case they encountered anyone along the way. This section houses secondary storage and staff quarters. The primary research wing, where the children are kept, lies deeper within the station, past several security checkpoints. Tonight, we are not going there. We are going to the data archive, 3 corridors ahead. They moved quickly and quietly, Thrain leading the way through corridors that shifted and curved unpredictably, guided by knowledge only someone who had worked inside the station for years could possess. Twice, they pressed themselves into shadowed alcoves as the soft hum of an approaching patrol drifted past. Kryvok security personnel, moving with calm, mechanical efficiency, unaware of the intruders hidden just feet away. Finally, they reached a small chamber lined with glowing data terminals, their surfaces flickering with strange, layered symbols that scrolled endlessly across translucent screens. "This is it," Thrain said, stepping quickly to the nearest terminal and beginning to work, his fingers moving with practiced precision. "If the Council has continued the extraction procedures as I suspect, there will be updated records here, timestamps, medical logs, everything we need." Elena stood watch near the entrance, while Grace helped Thrain navigate the unfamiliar system, translating fragments of data as they appeared. Minutes stretched painfully as Thrain worked, pulling file after file, cross-referencing timestamps, searching for the undeniable proof that would convince the world of what was truly happening above their heads. Then Grace's breath caught sharply. "Thrain, look at this." Elena turned just in time to see Thrain's expression shift from focused determination into something far darker. "What is it?" she asked, moving closer despite herself. "They accelerated the schedule," Thrain said quietly, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "The Council was supposed to wait until the children reached a stable adjustment period before beginning deep extraction procedures. But according to this log, they have already begun advancing several children ahead of schedule, citing urgency due to worsening conditions back on Kalen Voss." Elena's stomach dropped. Is Lily on that list? Thrain's fingers moved quickly across the terminal, pulling up a new file. His expression darkened further as he read. "Yes," he said quietly. "Her first deep extraction procedure is scheduled for tomorrow morning." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Tomorrow. We don't have time to plan a full rescue. We have to get her out now. Tonight. "Elena," Thrain said carefully, "if we attempt an unplanned extraction of even a single child, it will trigger an immediate station-wide lockdown. Every door will seal. Every corridor will fill with security personnel. We will lose any chance of freeing the others, and quite possibly any chance of freeing ourselves." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Elena said, her voice cracking, tears burning in her eyes. "Walk away and let them do this to her tomorrow, while I wait for some perfect rescue plan that might come too late." Grace stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on Elena's shoulder. "We finish gathering the evidence tonight, exactly as planned. Then the moment we're back on Earth, we release it immediately, publicly, to every news outlet and government official we can reach. If the whole world learns the truth before tomorrow morning, the pressure alone might force the Council to halt the procedures out of fear of consequences." Thrain nodded slowly. "It is a risk, but it is the only path with any real chance of protecting all the children, not just one." Elena squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe through the terror clawing at her chest. Every instinct told her to run straight for the research wing, to find her daughter and pull her free, no matter the cost. But she thought of the other 62 children, of parents just like her, waiting somewhere on Earth in the same desperate darkness she had lived in for the past 11 days. "Okay," she whispered finally. "We finish here, then we move fast." They continued their work, Thrain pulling every scrap of data he could access: medical logs, extraction schedules, internal council communications discussing the acceptable loss rates among the children, communications that made Elena's blood run cold with fury. Every file they copied felt like another nail driven into the coffin of the peace humanity had believed in for the past 3 years. Then, without warning, the terminal in front of Thrain flashed red, and a low, pulsing alarm began sounding softly throughout the chamber. "They know we're here," Thrain said sharply, his hands moving even faster across the controls. "Someone has detected unauthorized access. We need to leave immediately." Grace grabbed the small data drive Thrain had been filling with copied files, tucking it securely into her jacket. Elena moved toward the door, her heart hammering, every nerve in her body screaming with adrenaline. They burst into the corridor, just as the soft blue lighting shifted into a harsh, pulsing red, and somewhere in the distance, Elena heard the unmistakable sound of rapid footsteps approaching. "This way," Thrain said, pulling them down a side corridor that curved sharply away from the main path back to the docking bay. "We cannot return the way we came. Security will already be converging there." They ran, the corridors twisting unpredictably around them, the red emergency lighting casting long, shifting shadows against the smooth metallic walls. Elena's lungs burned, her legs aching from the unfamiliar effort, but she pushed forward, fueled by the image of Lily's face burned into her mind. Suddenly, Thrain skidded to a stop, throwing out an arm to halt Elena and Grace before they turned a corner directly into a group of approaching security personnel. "There is another route," he whispered urgently, pulling them back the way they had come, then down a narrow maintenance passage nearly hidden behind a curved section of wall. "It will take longer, but it avoids the main patrol paths." They squeezed into the tight passage, moving quickly through darkness broken only by faint strips of emergency lighting embedded along the floor. Elena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could hear Grace's ragged breathing just behind her, could hear the distant echo of voices and footsteps growing fainter as they moved deeper into the hidden passage. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a small, dimly lit storage area near the edge of the station. "The secondary docking bay is just beyond this section," Thrain said quietly, still breathing heavily. "If we move quickly and quietly, we may be able to reach it before security expands their search this far." They crept forward carefully, and for a moment, it seemed as though they might actually make it. Then, just as they reached the final corridor leading to the docking bay, a figure stepped out from the shadows ahead, tall and imposing, wrapped in the formal dark robes of a Kryvox Council enforcer. "Thrain," the figure said, its voice low and cold, carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "I expected you might attempt something foolish. I did not expect you would bring human accomplices into a restricted section of this station." Elena froze, every muscle in her body tensing, while beside her, Grace instinctively stepped back, her hand tightening around the data drive hidden in her jacket. Thrain stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Elena and Grace, his expression hardening into something Elena had not yet seen from him, a quiet, controlled defiance. "Step aside, Vorel," Thrain said firmly. "What is happening to these children is wrong, and you know it as well as I do." The enforcer, Vorel, tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable beneath the dim lighting. "What I know is that you have betrayed your own people to protect creatures whose lifespans barely register as a blink in the history of our species. The Council was clear. Their suffering is an acceptable cost for our survival." "Acceptable to who?" Thrain snapped, his voice rising with an intensity Elena had not heard from him before. "Not to me. Not any longer." Vorel's hand moved slightly, and Elena saw a faint device glint at his wrist, some kind of communication tool clearly preparing to summon additional security. Before he could activate it, the rain moved with surprising speed, closing the distance between them, and forcing Vorel's arm downward, the two of them grappling briefly in the narrow corridor. "Run!" the rain shouted, straining against the larger enforcer. "Get to the shuttle, now!" Elena hesitated only a fraction of a second before Grace grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. They sprinted the final stretch toward the docking bay, Elena's mind screaming with the fear of leaving Thrain behind, but knowing, with brutal clarity, that stopping now would doom everything they had worked to protect. They reached the shuttle just as the docking bay's alarms shifted into a full, blaring emergency sequence. Grace practically threw herself into the pilot seat, her hands trembling as she activated the launch sequence Thrain had taught them earlier that night, praying silently that the stolen credentials would hold just long enough to get them clear. Behind them, through the small viewport, Elena caught one final glimpse of the corridor they had just fled, and her heart clenched painfully as she saw Thrain still struggling against Vorel, his amber eyes briefly meeting hers through the narrow gap of the closing docking bay doors. Then the shuttle lurched forward, tearing away from the station and out into the vast, silent darkness of space, leaving Thrain behind. "They cannot hurt him, can they?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the shuttle's engines, her eyes still fixed on the shrinking silhouette of the station behind them. "He's one of their own." Grace's silence answered the question more clearly than any words could have. As the shuttle descended back toward Earth, carrying with it evidence that would soon shatter the fragile peace between two worlds, Elena pressed a hand against the small data drive tucked safely in Grace's jacket, her mind spinning with grief, fear, and a fierce, burning resolve. Tomorrow morning, unless something changed, her daughter would undergo a procedure that had already left other children broken and silent. Somewhere behind them, a Kryvox scientist who had risked everything to help them, now faced consequences Elena could not even begin to imagine. And somewhere ahead of them, waiting on the ground below, an entire world was about to learn a truth that would change the course of human history forever. "We have to move the second we land," Elena said quietly, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. Every news outlet, every government office, every parent whose child is still up there, they all need to know, right now, tonight. Grace nodded, her jaw set with grim determination. "Then let's make sure the whole world is listening by morning." The shuttle touched down in a quiet field far outside the city, exactly where Thrain had instructed them to land in case of emergency, a location chosen weeks earlier, specifically because it sat outside the range of standard Kryvox monitoring systems. Elena barely waited for the engines to power down before she was moving, her legs shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, her mind fixed entirely on the small data drive Grace held tightly in her hand. "We need a computer, real internet access, and every contact you have left from your time with the program," Elena said, her voice hoarse but steady. "We are not waiting until morning. We release everything tonight." Grace nodded, already pulling out her phone as they hurried across the dark field toward a small parked car, hidden beneath a canopy of trees, another piece of the plan Thrain had carefully arranged in advance. "I still have contact information for a journalist named Nathan Osei. He works for one of the largest independent news networks left in the country, one that hasn't accepted Kryvox sponsorship money like most of the major outlets have. If anyone will run this story without hesitation or corporate pressure, it's him." They drove through the night toward the city, Elena's hands white-knuckled against the steering wheel, while Grace worked furiously on her phone, drafting messages, attaching files, preparing everything they needed to send the moment they reached a secure connection. By the time they arrived at a small, quiet apartment belonging to one of Grace's old university friends, the sky had already begun shifting from black to the deep blue of early morning. Nathan Osei arrived within the hour, a tall man with tired eyes, and the sharp, alert focus of someone who had spent years chasing stories that powerful people wanted buried. He sat at the kitchen table, scrolling silently through the files Grace had transferred to his laptop, his expression growing darker with every passing minute. "This is real," he said finally, looking up at Elena and Grace with a mixture of disbelief and quiet fury. "These are actual internal council communications, medical logs, timestamps matching missing children reports from 12 different countries. If this is authentic, and I believe it is, this is the biggest story since the ships first arrived." "It's authentic," Elena said firmly. "And my daughter is scheduled for a procedure in a few hours that already left other children unable to speak. Or worse. We don't have time for a slow investigation. We need this out now, everywhere, all at once, before they have a chance to bury it." Nathan nodded slowly, already typing. I can have this live within the hour. But once this goes out, there's no controlling how the world reacts. This isn't just going to shake public opinion. It's going to shatter it completely. Then let it shatter, Elena said. Better a shattered piece than 63 children paying the price for a lie. At exactly 6:17 in the morning, Nathan Osei's network published the story, accompanied by every piece of evidence the rain had helped them gather. Internal council documents, medical extraction schedules, recorded communications discussing acceptable loss rates among human children. Within minutes, the story spread beyond Nathan's network, picked up by outlets across the globe, translated into dozens of languages, shared and reshared across every form of communication humanity possessed. By 7 o'clock, the story was the top trending topic on every major platform on Earth. By 8 o'clock, crowds had already begun gathering outside government buildings in cities across multiple continents, demanding answers, demanding action, demanding the immediate return of every child taken by the enrichment program. By 9 o'clock, emergency sessions had been called within the United Nations, world leaders scrambling to respond to a crisis that had erupted faster than any of them had anticipated. Elena watched it all unfold from Grace's friend's small apartment, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications, her exhausted mind struggling to process the sheer scale of what they had set into motion. Parents of other missing children began reaching out through social media, sharing their own stories, their own grief, their own fury, forming a rapidly growing network of families demanding the same answers Elena had spent the past 11 days desperately seeking. Then, just before 10 o'clock, the Kryvox Council issued their first public response. Elena watched the broadcast with tight fists and a racing heart as a calm, composed Kryvox representative addressed cameras from the steps of the United Nations building, flanked by human officials whose expressions betrayed a mixture of anger and barely concealed fear. The information circulating today contains dangerous distortions of a legitimate scientific partnership, the representative said smoothly, his voice carrying the same practiced calm that had first won humanity's trust 3 years earlier. The enrichment program has always operated with full transparency and consent. We categorically deny any wrongdoing and urge the public not to be misled by fabricated documents designed to damage the historic partnership between our two species. Elena felt fury rise hot and sharp in her chest. They're lying. Right there, on camera, in front of the entire world, and they're lying. Grace's jaw tightened as she watched the same broadcast on her own phone. It doesn't matter. Look at the comments. Look at the reactions. Nobody is buying it. Not after seeing actual internal documents with actual names and dates. She was right. Within hours, the public denial only fueled greater outrage, as independent researchers and journalists began cross-referencing the leaked documents with missing children reports, confirming detail after detail that could not have been fabricated. Crowds outside government buildings grew larger. Protests spread from city to city. Parents whose children had returned from the enrichment program in previous years began speaking publicly for the first time, describing strange behavioral changes, unexplained memory gaps, and lingering health issues they had never before connected to the program. By early afternoon, the pressure had grown too immense for governments to ignore any longer. One by one, world leaders began issuing statements demanding immediate, verified proof of the well-being of every child currently aboard the orbital station, along with immediate access for independent human medical teams. The Kryvox Council refused. Their refusal, broadcast live and dissected instantly across every news platform on the planet, became the final breaking point. What had begun as shock and fear rapidly transformed into something far more dangerous. A unified, global fury, unlike anything humanity had experienced in generations. Elena sat frozen in front of the television that evening, watching footage of massive crowds surrounding Kryvox embassies and research facilities in cities around the world, watching military forces in multiple countries begin mobilizing for the first time since the ships had arrived 3 years earlier, watching the fragile peace humanity had built with an alien species crumble apart in real time, all triggered by the truth she had risked everything to expose. "Is this what we wanted?" Elena whispered, more to herself than to Grace, who sat beside her on the small couch, equally transfixed by the unfolding chaos on screen. "I wanted Lily back. I wanted the truth out. I didn't want this." Grace placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder. You didn't create this, Elena. They did, the moment they decided our children's lives were an acceptable cost for their own survival. All we did was refuse to let them hide it any longer. As night fell, reports began emerging that several Kryvox research facilities around the world had gone completely silent, their staff withdrawing rapidly, their operations shutting down without explanation. Rumors spread quickly that the orbital station itself had begun preparing for departure, an unconfirmed but terrifying possibility that sent a fresh wave of panic through every parent still waiting for news of their missing children. Elena's phone rang just after midnight, an unknown number flashing across the screen. She answered immediately, her heart pounding. Elena, a familiar voice said, weak but unmistakable. It's Thrain. Relief and fear crashed through her simultaneously. You're alive. Are you safe? What's happening up there? Is Lily okay? I do not have much time, Thrain said quickly, his voice strained, background noise crackling faintly through the connection. The Council is preparing to relocate the station, following the exposure of our evidence. They fear human military retaliation, and they are correct to fear it. But relocation means accelerating every remaining procedure before departure, including your daughters. Elena's stomach dropped. When? Within hours, Thrain said grimly. I have limited access remaining, enough perhaps to delay things briefly, but not stop them entirely. Elena, listen to me carefully. If humanity intends to act, to actually retrieve these children before the station departs, it must happen immediately. There will not be a second opportunity. Elena's mind raced, grief and determination colliding violently inside her. Then I need to reach someone who can actually make that happen. Someone with real authority. Right now. Tonight. There was a brief pause on the line before Thrain spoke again, his voice quieter, heavier, with something that sounded almost like a warning. Elena, if human forces move against the station, the Council will not simply allow their research, and everything they have invested in it, to be taken without resistance. Whatever happens next will not be gentle. I fear this conflict is no longer one that can be resolved through words alone. Elena closed her eyes briefly, picturing Lily's face, picturing the countless other children whose parents were, in this very moment, staring at their own phones, desperate for the same impossible choice she now faced. Then let it be whatever it needs to be, she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I am not losing my daughter to protect a peace built on lies. Within the hour, Grace's contact, Nathan Osei, connected Elena directly with a senior government official coordinating the emergency response, a woman named Priya Kapoor, who listened intently as Elena relayed everything Thrain had told her. If what your contact says is true, Priya said grimly after Elena finished, and given everything already confirmed today, I believe it is, then we are looking at an extremely narrow window to act before that station departs with 63 children still aboard. Can it be done? Elena asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain composed. Can you actually get them out? Priya was silent for a long moment before answering. Emergency response teams have already been mobilizing since this morning, largely due to public pressure alone. With confirmation that the station intends to depart imminently, I believe authorization for direct intervention will come within the hour. But Mrs. Reyes, I need to be honest with you. An operation like this, executed this quickly, under this much pressure, carries enormous risk, both for the rescue teams and for the children themselves. Elena gripped the phone tightly, tears streaming silently down her face. I understand the risk. I am asking you to take it anyway. Please. There was a brief pause before Priya spoke again, her voice firm with resolve. Then let's bring them home. As dawn approached, Elena stood outside on the small apartment balcony, staring up at a sky still scattered with fading stars, knowing that somewhere far above her, a desperate rescue operation was about to begin, one that would determine not only her daughter's fate, but the fate of every child still trapped aboard a station preparing to vanish into the darkness of space forever. Behind her, the television continued broadcasting images of a world transformed overnight, crowds still gathered in cities everywhere, military forces mobilizing across multiple continents, and a fragile alien peace collapsing rapidly into something far more uncertain, far more dangerous, and far more permanent than than anyone could have predicted just 24 hours earlier. Elena wiped the tears from her face and whispered a quiet promise into the cold morning air. "Hold on, Lily. We're coming." The launch facility buzzed with a controlled chaos unlike anything Elena had ever witnessed. Engineers and military personnel moving with rapid precision beneath bright overhead lights. Voices calling out coordinates and system checks. Screens flashing with data Elena could not begin to understand. Priya Kapoor had arranged for her and Grace to be present at the command center. A decision that had required cutting through layers of bureaucracy in mere hours. Something that would have been impossible under any normal circumstances. But these were no longer normal circumstances. 3 rescue shuttles, hastily repurposed from existing space programs and reinforced with emergency defensive systems, stood ready on the launch pads outside, each one carrying trained personnel, prepared to board the Kryvox station and retrieve the 63 children still held within its walls. Elena sat gripping the edge of a console, her eyes fixed on the main display screen showing live telemetry from the approaching shuttles, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "They have visual confirmation on the station," a technician called out. "It's still in position, but engine systems are showing active power signatures. They're preparing for departure." "How much time?" Priya asked sharply, standing just behind Elena's chair. "Based on current power buildup, maybe 20 minutes before they can achieve full departure velocity," the technician replied. "It's going to be close." Elena's hands trembled as she watched the shuttles draw closer to the station on the display screen. Tiny points of light approaching a massive silver structure that had once represented hope and partnership, and now represented something far darker. Inside her jacket pocket, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out quickly, seeing Thrain's number flash across the screen. "Elena!" His voice came through immediately, strained and urgent. "The Council has detected the approaching shuttles. Security forces are mobilizing throughout the station. I have managed to disable the lock on the primary holding chamber where the children are kept, but I cannot guarantee how long that will remain open. You need to move quickly once your teams arrive." "Where exactly is the holding chamber?" Elena asked, relaying the information rapidly to Priya, who immediately began coordinating with the rescue teams through her own communications. "Deck 7, Central Research Wing," Thrain said. "I will try to guide your teams as best I can, but Elena, I must warn you, Varel and additional Council enforcers are already positioning themselves to intercept any rescue attempt. This will not be a simple extraction." Elena relayed every detail as quickly as she received it, watching on the main display as the rescue shuttles finally reached the station, docking swiftly at multiple points along its outer hull. Through grainy helmet camera footage now streaming onto secondary screens throughout the command center, Elena watched as armored rescue personnel moved swiftly through the same corridors she, Grace, and Thrain had crept through only days earlier. "Deck 7, one of the rescue leaders confirmed over the comm channel, his voice tight with focus. "Approaching the primary holding chamber now." Elena held her breath, gripping Grace's hand tightly beside her, both of them staring at the screen, as the rescue team rounded a final corner, and the camera feed revealed a large chamber lined with rows of small beds, dozens of frightened children sitting upright, their eyes wide with confusion and fear at the sudden intrusion. And there, near the far wall, sitting exactly where Elena had feared and hoped in equal measure, was Lily. "Lily," Elena whispered brokenly, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter's small face turn toward the approaching rescue team, confusion slowly shifting into desperate, hopeful recognition of the uniforms marking them as human rescuers. "We have visual confirmation on all 63 children," the rescue leader reported, beginning immediate evacuation. But just as the rescue team began moving the children toward the chamber's exit, the feed suddenly shook violently, the sound of raised voices and rapid movement crackling through the comm channel. "We have hostiles," the rescue leader's voice snapped sharply. "Multiple armed Kryvox security personnel converging on our position." Elena's heart lurched painfully as the helmet camera footage swung wildly, capturing brief, chaotic glimpses of Kryvox enforcers moving to block the chamber's only exit, their expressions cold and resolute. "Get the children behind cover," the rescue leader ordered urgently. "What's happening?" Elena demanded, her voice breaking with panic. "Is Lily safe? Someone tell me what's happening." Priya placed a steadying hand on Elena's shoulder, though her own expression betrayed deep concern. "They're establishing a protective perimeter around the children. Our teams were prepared for potential resistance." On the screen, the situation continued unfolding rapidly. Rescue personnel forming a defensive line between the frightened children and the advancing Kryvox enforcers, tension crackling visibly through the grainy footage. For a long, agonizing moment, neither side moved, the standoff stretching taut enough that Elena felt certain everyone in the command center had stopped breathing entirely. Then, unexpectedly, a new figure appeared on screen, stepping directly between the two opposing groups, his gray-tinted skin and amber eyes clearly visible even through the low-quality footage. "Thrain," Elena breathed. Thrain raised both hands slowly, addressing the Kryvox enforcers directly in a language the helmet camera's translation system struggled to fully capture, though fragments came through clearly enough for Elena to understand the desperate plea in his voice. "This ends now," Thrain said, his translated words appearing as text along the bottom of the screen. "Enough children have already suffered for our survival. I will not allow more harm to come to them, not while I still draw breath." Varel, visible now at the front of the Kryvox enforcers, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You would truly stand against your own people, Thrain, for the sake of creatures whose lives amount to nothing against the survival of our entire civilization." "I would stand against anyone," Thrain replied firmly, "who believes causing suffering to innocent children is an acceptable price for anything." For a tense, silent moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, remarkably, several of the Kryvox enforcers standing behind Varel began lowering their weapons, their expressions shifting from cold determination into something closer to uncertainty, perhaps even shame. Varel's jaw tightened as he glanced around at his own faltering forces, before finally, reluctantly, he too lowered his stance, stepping back from the standoff. "This is not over," Varel said quietly, though his voice carried far less conviction than before. "Perhaps not," Thrain replied, "but it stops today." Elena watched, breathless, as the rescue teams resumed their evacuation, quickly and efficiently guiding the children through the corridors and back toward the waiting shuttles. Minutes later, the command center erupted into cautious celebration as confirmation came through that all 63 children had been successfully retrieved and were now safely aboard the departing rescue shuttles, beginning their journey back toward Earth. Elena barely registered the cheers and relieved embraces filling the command center around her, her entire focus fixed on the small display screen still showing live footage from inside the shuttle, where exhausted, frightened children were finally being wrapped in warm blankets and reunited, one by one, with medical personnel checking gently for any injuries. Then, finally, the camera panned toward a small girl sitting quietly near the back of the shuttle, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest, her wide eyes searching the chaos around her. "Lily," Elena whispered again, her voice cracking completely this time, tears flowing freely down her face. The following hours passed in a blur for Elena, filled with medical checkups, tearful reunions, and the overwhelming relief of finally holding her daughter safely in her arms again. Lily clung tightly to her mother the moment they were reunited, her small body trembling, though the doctors confirmed, to Elena's immense relief, that Lily had not yet undergone the deep extraction procedure that had harmed so many other children. She was tired, frightened, and confused, but she was safe, and she was whole. In the weeks that followed, the world changed dramatically and permanently, with undeniable proof of the harm caused to human children now public knowledge, and with the successful rescue operation broadcast live across the globe. The fragile partnership between humanity and the Kryvox collapsed entirely. Diplomatic relations severed. Kryvox representatives withdrew from every human government body. The technology-sharing agreements that had defined the past 3 years came to an abrupt and permanent end. The Kryvox Council, facing overwhelming global condemnation and the loss of their primary research initiative, ultimately withdrew their remaining presence from Earth entirely, their ships departing quietly, without ceremony, retreating back toward whatever uncertain future awaited their dying homeworld, without the solution they had so desperately, and so wrongly, sought to take from Earth's children. Thrain remained behind, choosing, with the support of human authorities grateful for his crucial role in exposing the truth, to stay on Earth, rather than return to a species that had ultimately failed to value life the way he had come to believe it deserved to be valued. He worked quietly alongside human scientists and medical teams, helping treat the lingering effects experienced by the children who had already undergone procedures before the rescue operation, doing everything within his power to repair some small part of the harm his research had once caused. Elena visited him occasionally, bringing Lily along on quiet afternoons, watching her daughter slowly grow more comfortable, more herself again, laughing freely once more, counting stairs out loud with her familiar bright enthusiasm. One evening, sitting together on Elena's back porch as the sun set warmly over the horizon, Thorane watched Lily chase fireflies across the yard, her laughter carrying clearly through the cooling evening air. "Do you regret any of it?" Elena asked quietly, watching him carefully. "Everything you gave up, everything you lost, to help us." Thorane was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes reflecting the warm colors of the setting sun. "I lost my home, my people, and any future I once believed I understood," he said finally. "But I gained the certainty that some choices matter more than survival itself. Watching your daughter laugh like that, knowing she is safe, knowing 62 other children are equally safe tonight, because we refuse to look away from the truth, that is worth more than anything I gave up." Elena smiled softly, watching Lily's small silhouette dance joyfully across the darkening yard, her heart finally, after everything, beginning to feel whole again. Some peace, she realized, was never meant to last, not when it was built upon hidden suffering and silent sacrifice. But some truths, once finally spoken aloud, had the power to build something far stronger in their place, something rooted not in blind trust, but in the fierce, unwavering resolve of parents who would move heaven and earth itself to protect their children. And as the stars began appearing one by one across the darkening sky above them, Elena understood, with quiet certainty, that whatever uncertain future still lay ahead for both worlds, humanity had proven, decisively and unforgettably, exactly how far it would go when its youngest and most innocent were placed in harm's way. "Never again," she whispered softly into the cooling evening air, watching her daughter's joyful silhouette against the fading light. "Never again."